webcast introduction, I'd like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of subsequent repeated viewing, with copies of the recording being made available for those that request it. By being present at this meeting, it is likely that the recording cameras will capture your image, and this will result in you becoming part of the broadcast. You should be aware that this may infringe your human and data protection rights, and if you have any concerns, please contact the webcasting officer. Members, I don't need to tell you, when you're speaking, turn your microphone on, and when you finish, turn your microphone off. Apologies for absence.
Yes, Chairman, just from Councillor Burrows.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Holly Whitbread is on webcast this evening, but she is present to give any responses. Declarations of interest. Any members with declarations of interest? No? Okay. Minutes of the last meeting, can I take those as being agreed?
Agreed.
Reports of portfolio holders, if any? No? Okay, thank you very much. Public questions and request to address the Cabinet?
None, Chairman.
Thank you. And I note on item 7 that Councillor Helen Kane is present, but no further report to give, I would imagine.
Yeah, that is correct.
Thank you, Helen. Item 8, the updated medium-term financial plan. Councillor Phillip.
Thank you, Chairman. And after an upbeat start to the minute, it's my job to drag us all down to doom and gloom, which, coming from a Scottish background, should fit in quite nicely, actually. It wasn't Dad's Army that said, oh, there's no money, but that's a good approximation of where we are at the start. What we're looking at tonight, members, is the updated medium-term financial plan for 23-24 all the way out to 27-28, but essentially we're looking initially at the first year. The first year says there is a significant hole in our finances for next year. That's nothing particular to do with ourselves. All councils are finding themselves in the same situation, and the report does call out a whole number of the reasons why there are the pressures on that. Inflation, not least on employees and supplies and services. Potentially drop in the amount of government grant that we get next year. And the bottom line, therefore, is that our estimated net expenditure for next year is around £19.4 million, but our funding is only £15.28 million. So that gives us a gap of about 4.12 million. Let's call it 4.2 for the sake of argument. That is a significant percentage of our funding of 15 million, pretty close to 25%. I would like to thank on the webcast the amount of work that's already gone in from our portfolio holders and their lead officers, looking at areas which will be tractable to savings coming forward. But we shouldn't beat about the bush. This is going to be hard. We are going to be faced with decisions that we, in the better years, wouldn't have to take. We're going to have to make decisions that are really hard, because it'll be a case between doing some things that we want to do and not doing things that we want to do, and that balance is always going to be very hard. We have in the appendices much more detail about the position for the General Fund and also for the HRA going forward. It is worth noting, and I will call this out, is that in terms of the General Fund, our net expenditure in 22-23 for employees is indicated to be just over 25 million, with that rising to almost 27 million next year. In the context of what we've been talking about, of our net expenditure going to be 19 million, that is a huge amount. So clearly any place that we're looking in terms of significant rises in employee costs does put significant pressure on our budget. And as I said in February when I was bringing it forward, we budgeted 2% for this pay rises. That's likely to be 5% on average this year. That starts us off with a problem. The likelihood is, at the moment, as we look at our finances, we're spending over the budget this year, so we will be having an impact on our reserves. We will obviously be continuing to do as we did last year, look at to see if there's any in-year savings we can make. I won't say an awful lot about the housing revenue account. I know I need to sit down with my colleague Holly Whitbread and we'll take a look at that. But one of the key parts on that is that inflation running between 10 and 12% with a potential cap on our rent rises of well under that will start to make our current 30-year business plan look unsustainable in the out years. That we'll need to look at. I will say this, and it's a really positive thing, and it goes a bit against the grain of this, but the really positive thing is if this has happened 2 years ago, we wouldn't have had a 30-year business plan for the HRA, so we wouldn't have known what the issues were going to be. At least now we've got a really good handle on it. We can actually make the decisions in the light of that business plan to make sure that we actually start to bring these things back into plan. I think I'll leave it there, Chairman, but happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Councillor Phillip. Members of the Cabinet? Councillor Patel.
Thank you, Chairman. This gap that we're faced with at the moment, can we not if we were to sell one of our commercial assets, could that money not be used to plug that gap?
No is the simple answer, because what our commercial assets sit in is capital fund. We can sell and actually generate capital, so REIT has got no effect on the revenues of the general fund. If anything, it would probably make things worse, because if we sold one of our attractive assets, we'd get less rent in. If we get less rent in, that's less revenue coming in, so it makes the gap bigger.
Thank you. Any other members of the Cabinet? Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Chairman. The portfolio holder is absolutely right, and I wanted to thank him for his report. I found this very difficult reading over the weekend, and when I reread it this morning, we've got some very difficult decisions ahead of us, I feel certain. And can I thank Andrew Small, for writing a report that someone who hasn't got a finance background can more or less understand. So thank you for that, Mr. Small. So we have got difficult decisions. I read this report again just after I read an article in the Times, and I will explain to you I am absolutely contrasting the two. We've got these difficulties, and part of the difficulty, and only part of the difficulty, is we're expecting a reduction of 1.15 million from the government. And one of the lead articles in the Times today says how casually the government has just written off £4 billion of taxpayers' cash in a single year. And that's from the Times newspaper, hardly very radical. So I was even more annoyed when I saw this. But back to how we deal with this. We've obviously got to have maximum, and I mean, I'm sure this is common ground. We've obviously got to have maximum consultation with our staff and programme heads about where sensible savings can be made if they haven't already been made. And we've got to absolutely do our best to protect our frontline services, Chairman, and I'm sure this is a given across the council, and particularly those frontline services that hit them or are more important to our more vulnerable members of our community. And I think the final remark I want to make is really just a question. Maybe I'm comparing apples and pears, but I couldn't quite understand the remark about only having a recent long-term HRA account, because I clearly remember when I was a housing portfolio holder, which is a long time ago, we used to have 25-year HRA forecasts. So I don't think a 30-year HRA forecast is a particularly new thing, unless it's a change of format or something that the portfolio holder was mentioning, but he seemed to suggest it was something that was only introduced 3 or 4 years ago. I think it's something that we've had for quite some time, unless it's a question of apples and pears. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Murray. Councillor Phillip.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll take the last one first. The point I was making, Councillor Murray, is that we had an out-of-date business plan for several years. As most members will remember, I kept banging on in various meetings saying we need to get this in place. And it was the fact that we didn't have that up-to-date visibility, which we now do, and that is useful. And if he remembers, when it did come to council, the business plan was very clear that it was going to be a living document that would keep a living system that would keep being updated as things changed, and that's what we can do here to actually make sure we're in the right places. I think there's a couple of things I would actually say in terms of government funding. We don't know how much it's going to be. We don't know when we'll find out how much it's going to be. And we don't know whether it'll be the number that we've got in our plan or not. So apart from those known unknowns, there may be a couple of unknown unknowns that I haven't come across yet, but we're doing our best that we can in terms of projecting what we think it's likely to be. If it's worse than we think it's likely to be, then it gives us a bigger problem. If it's better, then that's great. That puts removes some pressure. In terms of what we're looking at for savings, Councillor Murray, the key part there is obviously, as you said, protect our vulnerable, keep our services running, looking at things that we have a statutory requirement to do, and actually looking at some of them to see whether we're doing them in a way that is appropriate when finances are as tight as this. If there are things that we're going above and beyond that we don't need to do, that are not going to necessarily impact the most vulnerable, then perhaps that's something we need to start cutting back on. We need to look at it from a member point of view as well. Are there things that we can do in terms of how we're operating to make ourselves more efficient and perhaps reduce the cost pressure on some of the things we do? So we're looking at all of those. I'm quite convinced that with the amount of work that's going into this, that we will narrow the gap significantly by the time we get to Cabinet in December. Will we be all the way there? We might be. Does that mean that we will remain all the way there? Probably not, because I can fully see things changing between December and the February budget. I was talking to Mrs. Small earlier on today, and I wouldn't be surprised to be surprised a week before our budget that something crawls out of the woodwork that nobody had thought of. And all we can do is be as well prepared as we possibly can. And like we did last year, Councillor Murray, I will be coming obviously to the scrutiny panel as well to make sure that we go through this in great detail so that we know what the best that we can do. And as I say, it will involve some difficult decisions, but again, hopefully we'll make the right ones there.
Thank you, Councillor Phillip. Councillor Holly Whitbread.
Thank you, Chairman, and sorry for my absence this evening due to a positive COVID test, unfortunately, but I'm feeling absolutely fine. Just to add to Councillor Phillip's remarks in relation to the HRA business plan, I think where the difference is actually in terms of our regeneration and council house building programme. Here we've got a really kind of costed plan. However, that costed plan does not foresee for the huge rises in inflation and the impact this might have on public work board loans. So we will have to reconfigure and reconsider in light of those. But we did have that kind of really solid piece of work done. I know previously there have been forecasts in place, but this is a really well thought out plan for the future, and also with good considerations of borrowing, but obviously the circumstances around that may now have changed, unfortunately. But Councillor Phillip answered the question in full. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Phillip.
Chairman, if I also might say that the situation of the housing revenue account is probably ever so slightly less pressing, and that the impact is not as obvious next year, which it is in our general fund.
Absolutely. Councillor Phillips, can I thank yourself and officers from finance and obviously officers from across the council who are putting in the most collaborative exercise I've ever seen on a budget for many years, probably going back to 20 years. in difficult times, and it's really good to see everyone working together to try and fill the gap early. We don't know yet what things will look like. Inflation has obviously gone well beyond what we imagined back when the budget was set on the day that Russia decided to commit to an illegal war against Ukraine, before we knew any of the other things that have happened. So I think it's really, really good that we're making early preparations this year on the budget, and that works in hand. There is a long way to go. We need more savings, but most importantly, this is not a problem just for this year. I think what members have to be aware of is this will be a problem for the medium-term strategy, and that the only answer to this is transformation of the council. Another way of changing things, and as Councillor Murray quite rightly said during his presentation, is that the most important thing is that we protect those services that are most important to our residents as best we can, and they may have to be delivered slightly differently, but we will deliver them. And I would say to people out there, this is still a council with ambition and drive to actually do the things that its residents wants, not just what we think they need. Can we take the recommendations before us and agree those? Agreed. Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Phillip, it's your night. So item 9, Qualis one-year business plan.
Thank you, Chairman. And I would point out that the Qualis one-year business plan, we took that to review and scrutiny earlier and had a very useful discussion, and I was happy to listen to all the things that were put forward. Just for Cabinet members' awareness, we would normally bring forward a one-year business plan and an update to the 4-year business plan each year. However, the turnover of financial circumstances at the moment is such, particularly in the construction industry, that makes postulating a 4-year business plan probably out of date between the time we published it and the time I got here to present it. So we made a decision, myself, Andrew Small as the council side of Qualis and Sasha Jevons as the managing director of Qualis, that it made no sense to spend money on Qualis doing a 4-year business plan that would come out of date that quickly. We have got a 1-year business plan which is in general aligned with the 4-year business plan that we have already approved, with some significant changes to the finances, primarily driven from the inflation point of view and also the changes to construction costs. The Qualis business plan is actually attached as an appendix to this report. The key parts, I think, as far as Cabinet is concerned today, are that we need to approve the business plan, which hopefully you have all read. And also, as part of that business plan, we had started to investigate the possibility of doing an asset sale transfer to Qualis. Given the changes in the borrowing rates and the risk in the market, that was not going to show significant benefit either to ourselves or Qualis in the short term. However, we had seconded our asset management team to Qualis. We did that last September. The aim there was to see whether we could do things better in Qualis than we could in the council. The answer, members, is a resounding yes, we could. One of the really positive things is that we have significantly increased our rent roll over the past year to the extent of nearly £500,000. That makes a significant difference both to both business plans. So what I'm proposing in here is that we actually formalise that agreement whereby our asset management team is transferred across to Qualis. They've been working with them for years, so they're happy working there. We come to a commercial agreement with Qualis on that asset management so that we see benefit to ourselves and Qualis see a benefit if they manage to drive up the rent roll. So we should see more money and Qualis should see more money if we can get that up. It's a very sensible way to do it. However, we haven't gone through the full commercials on that, so I'm asking you to delegate to me in conjunction with Mr. Small the ability to negotiate those terms so that we can actually get a way forward for this and we can actually start to look to see benefit on both sides of that happening. I guess the key parts as well in terms of this is the impact of the national economic situation and particularly the uncertainty in construction. We're seeing tenders coming back to Collis which are baking in a significant amount of uncertainty risk in it, and that is something that is neither sustainable nor good. So that's one of the reasons why we've gone for the 1 year, but it's also why we're looking at significantly impacted returns from Collis this year because of the increase in costs. Increase in costs across the board can be as much as 25%. That's a big factor into construction. The details are in the report, but I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Councillor Phillip. Councillor Bedford.
Thank you. Councillor Phillip, I wonder if you could just give us an insight into when we get quotes back from contractors, are contractors generally saying that they'll only guarantee a quote for, say, 12 weeks or 14 weeks, or are they open-ended and saying guaranteed a quote for, say, 6 months?
I'll probably pass that one across to Sasha as Managing Director, but I would say in general when we're getting quotes back, they're coming with a time limit, which is what you would expect. I doubt it's 6 months. It may be 12 weeks, but if we want accurate figures, I suspect Sasha may have a better grip on that than I have.
Sasha, can I ask for a response?
Sure, it's certainly the former and not the latter. Contractors are not prepared to hold prices for 6 months at the moment.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other members of the Cabinet? In that case, Councillor Lyon.
It's working. Thank you, Chairman. Just a question about regeneration schemes. We've got quite a few regeneration schemes going on, and I know I've been actively involved in the Lions Farm one. How is this going to affect those regeneration schemes, and are we sort of certain that we're going to be able to continue with them?
Councillor Phillip.
It's come back on again.
Yeah, that's good. Technology is wonderful when it works, isn't it? I think it's important, Councillor Lyon, to draw the distinction between the housing revenue account regeneration schemes, which is what things like Limes Farm are, and that's covered by the housing revenue 30-year plan. And that's, I think, what Councillor Holly Whitbread was talking about in terms of looking at those ones, because when we have to borrow for them, the cost of borrowing has gone up significantly. So I'm not going to touch those because that doesn't come into Collis. Collis, we set aside loans for doing regeneration within the district. It has to be within the district. The challenge there is to find commercial areas which can be tractable to that, and that's proving quite difficult at the moment. It is possible that one of the upsides, if I can put it that way, to the current difficulties in finance is that there may be 1 or 2 more places that might become available for us to do that. One good example, I think, as far as Collis is concerned, is the Cartersfield Road site that they bought from us. Now, that's industrial property. It's great from an overall Collis point of view because it helps to spread our risks. Collis is looking at residential. We have retail, but industrial as well. That moves it over. Industrial also has one of the advantages in that it tends to be relatively simple construction work, and therefore the turnaround can be quite quick, and that's good for a cash flow point of view. So Collis is going to continue looking for sites, but you can't magically make sites appear. So if they come, we're in a position to execute on them. If they don't, then we have to wait for them to come.
Thank you very much. Councillor Murray.
Thank you. I can't be sure, but could I ask Councillor Heap to mute because he's the only one not muted and I'm getting feedback. That sounds better. Thank you, Councillor Heap. But be very interested to hear what you want to say later. I won't repeat everything I said at ONS because I feel as if I got adequate answers. But I do just want to flag 2 things. I'm really glad that we're in a position where we're going to have proper scrutiny of the possible transfer of grounds maintenance. I did think it was a bit odd initially that Collis should have have it in their year's plan, work plan, when we hadn't agreed as a council that we were going to transfer it, but I had it explained why that was the case, and it wasn't a question of the cart coming before the horse. So I'm satisfied with that. I think the only thing I would say, and this isn't the right place for a detailed examination, but we did have a comment from the portfolio holder that Qualis were doing things better than the council, and he mentioned one field. I do just want to say to a wider audience, and I did bring this up at ONS, I've certainly got anecdotal evidence, and I accept that it's no more than anecdotal evidence at this stage, that the customer interchange, and let's put it like that, of housing repairs is not as good since it's been transferred to Collis. There may well be statistics that work is being done quicker, work is being done more efficiently, but certainly the feedback that I've picked up from a number of different sources is that the quality of the housing repairs interchange with the customer, in other words, our tenants, isn't as good. Now, I'm sure that isn't a Loughton thing, it's just something I've picked up. So I just wanted to say that, and still looking at mechanisms where we can scrutinise that. So that's one for you, Councillor Helen Kane, to think about. But thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Phillip.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I would use the analogy of chicken and egg for the grounds maintenance and the Qualis business plan rather than the cart and horse. There is a presumed order in cart and horse, less so with chicken and egg. We have to have in the business plan for the year, otherwise we would have to say Qualis is not planning to have it. We're planning to look at whether it's the right thing to do, so we need a plan on both sides. If decisions made differently, then plans change, but it's better to have the plan there than not. We did talk about the level of housing repairs, and I know that Councillor Holly Whitbread was aware of those comments. I won't go into them here, but I do believe that in general the work that's being done by Qualis is of an acceptable standard. I'm not getting significant pushback on that. And as I said, I think at scrutiny I do meet with the Managing Director of Qualis on a regular basis, so that there's always an open opportunity for things to be fed through. And because we're closely related to Qualis, any issues between the Council and Qualis can be resolved quickly and more simply than it would be with another external contractor.
Thank you. Councillor Heap.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, yes, I mean, Councillor Murray did point out that, yes, Qualis may be attending more swiftly, but I'm not sure that the quality of the work is, in fact, as good as it used to be. And certainly they seem to be charging more. It's only a couple of comments, really. So Councillor Phillip is bemoaning the fact that he's restricted in what he can do with the money that's given to Qualis, but it's more like a modern Bretton Woods agreement, really. It's a good thing that it's contained within the district. And the only other thing I would say is that in my business, what we do is we guarantee a price for 2 weeks because we're doing parties and events and that kind of thing. So the answer is for everybody to make decisions quicker if you want to maintain the pricing.
Thank you. Councillor Phillip.
I would be very loath to compare constructing a multiple dwelling site with the same approach that needed to be taken to a party. I don't think the two things are valid. When you look at a tender coming back, you have to make sure that everything is in there in an appropriate way. And some of the costs do change relatively rapidly. I do tend to steer clear of comments around Qualis not doing things as well. I don't think that's... I'm not getting that feedback in the way that Councillor Murray and Councillor Heap appear to be. And I would also take exception at the fact that he says they're more expensive, because what we're seeing from the figures is that it's actually helping to save the housing revenue account money in terms of what we're doing. So from that point of view, if it's less pressure on the housing revenue account, and that means that we can therefore either build more council houses or refurbish more council houses, make places better for our housing tenants to live in, I think that's a significantly positive thing, and we are covered with an agreement between Collis and the HRA part of the council, and that does cover things as well as the cost in terms of the quality of work that needs to be done, and if there are issues then they will get resolved.
Councillor Holly-Whitbread.
Thank you, Chairman. And I think most of what I wanted to say has been said this evening, and I did say at the previous scrutiny meeting. But just in response to some of Councillor Murray and Councillor Heap's comments, what I would say about Qualis, I'm not by any means saying that they're perfect, but I think that certainly I personally, from my dealings with both residents and officers, have seen an improvement. And what is good about the relationship is actually when something does go wrong, I can meet with Sasha or Ben, whoever it might be, and take it up directly with that chain of command. And that has been successful on numerous occasions. And also we are in regular contact, which I think is very important and definitely an improvement on what went before. But what I would say to Councillor Murray, if there's any specific examples, please do raise them with me and to Councillor Heap as well. And I'm more than happy to take them up directly.
Thank you very much, Councillor Whitbread. Councillor Phillip.
I don't think I need to add anything to Councillor Whitbread's extensive reply.
Thank you. Councillor Rose Brooks.
Thank you, Councillor Whitbread. Just a quick question, really, and I know that we're going to be looking at it later in November, but if all the staff, I've had very positive experience of grounds maintenance this year as a team, very helpful on several occasions, and if all the staff are two-peed over, so their conditions are the same, including pensions, what is the sort of financial saving in moving them into Qualis, please?
Councillor Phillip.
I'm going to refer Councillor Brooks to the answer that I will give when I come to scrutiny in November, when the details will be there in front of her. But suffice it to say that what we've seen elsewhere is that changes to systems and changes to management structure allow things to be done more efficiently, and that then allows the staff to work in a better way and allows us to develop ways of doing things that are better. Added into that, it is possible that when staff chuppy over, they can thereafter change the terms and conditions that they're in, if they want to, if they see an advantage to that.
Thank you. I've got no other members to speak. What I would say, and I'd like to actually make clear, what a successful year that Qualis have had with major planning applications passed. We've heard from the portfolio holder for housing how repairs have been carried out at a satisfactory level and the communications have improved. We are going through very difficult times, as we just heard a short time ago, where we have inflationary costs that are almost uncontrollable at the moment. But I think Qualis has got a good record there to show to us. So this one-year business plan is the right way forward for now, and you've got the recommendations before you. Can I take those as being agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Okay, now I need to skip backwards because I missed out a section of your previous report, Councillor Phillip, and I know you didn't want to finish just yet, so you've got the item 8A, which is the capital programme update.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I do. It's frequently we forget that the budget covers both a revenue budget and a capital budget. We have got an update showing what's happening there. We have an eye-wateringly big number of £226 million in the capital expenditure over the next 5 years. That is that's a lot of money. As members will be well aware, because it's been referred to on many occasions, that the cost of borrowing is increasing significantly. It did drop back a little bit. We know that there are things that we need to do. These give us the update of where it is. You can see called out starting in Appendix A on page 29 of the supplementary where the changes are. Again, this is an indicative view of where we are at this stage in our budget cycle. There may be changes to capital projects that are driven by us trying to make sure that we don't overspend on capital and therefore have to spend general fund money on administering those projects. Just as an example, I'll use the government's Rural Prosperity Fund add-on to the Shared Prosperity Fund, which is about £500,000. We're expected to do around about projects of no more than about 50,000 in this. That means a minimum of 10 projects. And the idea there is that we're not allowed to charge any admin fee for that. That basically is something that's not sustainable that way, so we have to find a way around it. So I don't want to spend money from revenue functioning on capital, but this is where we're thinking of the capital falling over the next 5 years. Happy to take questions.
Thank you. Members? Okay, so you've got the... Oh, Councillor Heap.
Sorry, Chairman. Thank you. It's not really a question, it's more of a comment. Is that when I started in 2016, we owed £183 million with an income of about 22.5 million. The income is still the same, but we now own £500 million. So that may be where the problem is, and that was nothing to do with any Russia invasion of anywhere.
Councillor Phillip.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Councillor, he keeps getting this one wrong. We are only in the position that we are in because we've made those investments. Those investments have allowed us to generate revenue, which if we didn't have the revenue from Qualis, if we didn't have the revenue, for example, from our shopping park, we would be not looking at a 4 million hole in our budgets, we'd be looking at a much, much larger hole. Now, there is a perfectly valid question in terms of our capital expenditure going forward is how much can we afford? And as I pointed out, with our 226 million of capital, it's worth remembering that 180 of that is in terms of our housing revenue account, which is tied up in that 30-year business plan that we talked about, which will become unsustainable down the line. That, therefore, is what Councillor Whitbread will be looking at in terms of what they're scheduling. That may well involve us spending less capital. That in its turn would have less interest, which would then make the housing revenue account easier to balance, but it would mean that we can't do as much for our residents. It is one of those difficult decisions that I talked about earlier.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Councillor Phillip. Members, you've got 2 recommendations. Can I take those as being agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Okay, moving onwards. Item 10, the EFDC litter strategy. Councillor Avey.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, you have before you a litter strategy, which I think has been reviewed and indeed amended at the request of the Select Committee. Basically, the Council doesn't have one, and it is needed. And it is an important issue given the number of complaints from residents regarding littering in all its forms in the district. Also, the more successful we are at pursuing this policy and all the underlying actions it mentions, the more money will be saved from the current expenditure of approximately 1.7 million, which is an enormous sum, on picking it up in whatever form it is. So I would recommend to you that we adopt this litter strategy.
Thank you very much, Councillor Avey. Members, any questions? Councillor Murray. Oh, sorry, Councillor Lyon first. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, this microphone's causing a problem. I think this is a really good piece of work, and I think it's absolutely essential. But I also think we need to be proactive in this approach. What we're doing here with litter is picking it up after it's been dropped. And I think we really need to look at engaging with the community to actually stop it being dropped in the first place, and to get an education plan out there, both through perhaps the Youth Council, community champions, and any of the other sort of associated activities that we actually engage with. So I think this is great, but I think we do need to be proactive in actually making this work.
Thank you very much. Councillor Avey.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, indeed. It's no good just having the stick. We need the carrot.
and education is key. And we need to get young people to buy into the fact that we don't want our countryside looking like certain countries I've just visited in the Middle East, which were covered with litter everywhere, absolutely disgusting. And frankly, I think littering has increased over the last decade, and we are getting worse. And really, hopefully, with the help of younger people, we can stop it. But you're right, there does need to be education.
Thank you very much. Councillor Murray.
I never seem to be able to unmute myself as quickly as I might, but that might be, some people might like me to unmute myself more slowly. Now, I have a passion about litter, I have to say, living right by our wonderful local recreation ground that stretches from Chigwell Lane in Debden part of Loughton through to Roding Lane between Buckershill and Chigwell, and it's certainly a growing problem. I just want to make a couple of points in general and then two specific points on page 40, if the portfolio holder wants to turn to page 40. I thought it was a good opportunity tonight to welcome the work of the local civic groups that we've got across the district that are very proactive on this. And if you allow me to be parochial for a minute, I do want to flag up the wonderful work of the Loughton Wombles group. We've got a group of about 20 people who buy into once a month, and they do work across the town picking up litter. It shouldn't be there to pick up, but it is, and the Loughton Wombles do a wonderful job. And if we've got younger councillors like Councillor Patel there tonight who don't know who the Wombles are, if he Googles the Wombles, he'll find out all about Uncle Bulgaria and Wimbledon Common. So that's where the name comes from. More seriously, I do also want to flag up the work schools do. Because most schools that I know of, and I'm sure there's very few that don't, do a wonderful job around litter, either in terms of an environmental education impact, in terms of a reward system. I mean, Roding Valley, and it won't be different from any other school, actually has the 4 houses with different colours, and the different bins have different colours, and there's house points for the number of bottles that are, and litter that's put into each litter bin. I think they probably transfer them from each one to the other, of course, but it's all about rewarding right behaviour. And it's also used as a bit as a punishment. If we see people drop litter, then they're made to pick it up after school in a high-vis jacket, with parental permission, of course. So I do think a lot of work is done in schools around it. But it comes right from the beginning. It comes from how families bring up their children right from the beginning, I think. But those are my general points. My two specific points are on, and they're not numbered, but it's the bullet points this is achieved by. And I don't want to appear ungrateful or nitpicking, but it says regularly review our weed removal programme with Essex County Council. Well, that won't take very long then, because in Loughton I wouldn't have said there was a weed removal programme. You go to anywhere where weeds are growing in the gutter, and there isn't a weed removal programme, so I wasn't quite sure what that meant. Now, I have to say, and I'm not just saying Epping gets special treatment, because I dare say it doesn't, but I was amazed when I walked from Oxfam down to the station. I couldn't see a single weed in a single gutter from the Oxfam shop down to the station. You walk in any of the roads in Loughton and you can't miss the weeds. So I thought that was an interesting point. And then drain maintenance. Now, I'm not absolutely sure what that means, but you go to any of the drain covers in our area and they're almost completely blocked. So I think we've got to get some of those basics right as well, because it's just not happening, Chairman. It might be Essex Highways policy or EFDC's policy, because I think it's a shared role. but in many parts of our district, that service just isn't happening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Murray. Councillor Avey.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, I was trying to lip read Councillor Murray there. When he looked down, I couldn't actually see what he was saying or hear what he was saying. We have had some problems with the weed management programme. I won't go into that here, but there have been distinct problems, which we do on behalf of Essex. I think there have been. I'm looking at the officer behind me. I don't know if those problems have been rectified yet, but there have been problems. So I would hope that we can get that resolved. And also drainage maintenance is important. Again, I take note of the comment.
Thank you. Councillor Holly Whitbread.
Thank you, Chairman, and I'm happy to take Councillor Murray on a tour of our weeds in Epping, because there are a number. So yeah, it's not just Loughton which has weeds. I'm regularly reporting them across Epping and Faden Boys. But I would say a thank you for Councillor Patel, because I don't think he's ever been called young in a meeting. He does look good for 50. Just in relation to the litter picking strategy, which I certainly welcome, I just wanted to make a comment on community contribution to that. Like Councillor Murray, I run regular litter picks in Epping, and I also know in Faden Boys they run regular litter picks. And actually we get such fantastic community engagement in these sessions, and of all ages. It's always really good to see people from the age of about 6 to their late 70s out litter picking, and it's a really good way of bringing the community together. Obviously it's disappointing that they have to do that work in the first place. The other comment I just wanted to make is around our housing estates, particularly when it comes to our regeneration schemes. One of the things we're looking at is litter, where it's put. The Safer Streets scheme that we're doing in Waltham Abbey is a good example of this, with litter tidies included within that to try and discourage littering. But yeah, thank you, they're all my points.
Thank you. Councillor Avey, did you want to answer any of those?
I don't think there's any, just noted really.
Yeah, thank you very much. Councillor Patel.
Thank you, Chairman. I feel like I'm having to apologise for my youthful good looks. But I am old enough to remember the Wombles, so in response to Councillor Murray. I think I've mentioned already in previous full council meeting that when I was re-elected back in 2019, I actually met with our local brownies, and the questions that I were asked were all around littering, particularly around in the forest and the harm it does to wildlife, etc. I think the problem we have is I'm looking at the table, Appendix 4 on page 58. The level of fines is so low, and I believe that these are, we're told what we can, the levels of fines that we can impose on perpetrators, but how do we actually catch these people in the act? Because obviously gathering the evidence base to demonstrate that someone has fallen foul is quite difficult. I'd be interested to know how we take forward these prosecutions.
Councillor Avey.
Well, as you can imagine, enforcement is difficult, specifically where we're talking about, which is the most common form of littering in the district, which is people throwing things from cars, vehicles, which in my ward is a real problem. The road going through Epping Upland is constantly littered by moving vehicles. There is talk of CCTV cameras being used to catch people, but you would imagine with all these things the evidential level is quite high. You need to have clear pictures of the number plate of the vehicle, and then there's a legal process. But we will look at every means available. The other issue is on fining. That's obviously not down to us, that's down to the government and the courts. So we can't influence that. But I would agree with you that the fines are too low for this kind of thing in the main.
Thank you. I'm going to shoot to Councillor McCready next, because she's been waiting for ages. Councillor McCready.
Thank you so much, Chairman. I really welcome this report. And sorry, I did write my notes earlier, so I didn't forget something. And I do thank the officers for their hard work in producing it. And I listened to all the comments around the room, and I agree with everything. However, it was, as a draft, originally brought before Stronger Place on the 5th of July. And it was decided that more detail was needed on the various issues, which is the issues you've all brought up tonight. It was my understanding that it was to be returned to Stronger Place on the 13th of September for the details to be discussed. However, with the subsequent death of Her Majesty, this did not happen, and our next Stronger Place meeting isn't until about the 7th of November. It's similar to that, yes. So there are many points here that I would like to raise, and I was going to enumerate them all, but I thought it's not quite the right meeting or sufficient time for me to raise them. So whilst I realise the need for this strategy to go forward, I would also like to see more detail on its implementation. And may I request a task and finish panel, please? Thank you.
Councillor Avey.
Thank you for that. Well, my understanding of the situation is as follows. The policy went before the Select Committee. A large number of points made. The policy was amended accordingly and then circulated by the officer. And the death of Her Majesty did interfere with that process slightly, but the policy was amended as requested by the committee. The second point I'd like to make is this is an overarching policy. It isn't a Bible to all things to do with littering or waste. And therefore the devil is in the detail which goes underneath the policy and refers to enforcement and so forth. So as an overarching policy, it's something we need, but there's a lot more underneath, which I don't think that we intend to put in this overarching policy. I don't know if the officer wants to make any additional comment to that, the author of the policy. James.
Thank you. As Councillor Avey has said, this is an overarching strategy. And overwhelming feedback from the Stronger Place was that the first draft, or the draft presented at Stronger Place, there was too much detail and it was far too long. Hence, this has been streamlined and a lot more user-friendly and easier to read. And towards the back of the strategy, it details how we will report, and I'm more than, rather than a task and finish, I'm more than happy to provide a regular update and progress report to Stronger Place and produce a report for that committee to say this is what we said we would do, this is what we've done, and report on the progress.
Thank you very much, James. Okay, Councillor Janet Whitehouse.
No, it's Holly.
Sorry, Chairman, do you say Janet Whitehouse or John Whitehouse?
Janet Whitehouse, yourself.
Oh, sorry, I thought you said John. Yes. First of all, just to comment on the weeds. Councillor McCready didn't mention it, but she did tell us that she'd seen officers pulling up weeds in some of the roads of Epping last week, so they are out and about occasionally. But my recollection of the first draft of the litter strategy is similar to Councillor McCready's. I was substituting that night at Stronger Place, and it was definitely said it was coming back to us before it came to Cabinet. And it wasn't that it was too detailed, it was too general and didn't have enough detail in it, was our main criticism. Councillor Avey says it was circulated. I don't know who to. Certainly, as a substitute, I didn't see it. Doesn't sound to Councillor McCready, who's a member of that select committee, saw it either. Presumably, this is something we want the public to read and to take note of. And there's been mention of it being overarching. My impression of an overarching strategy is that below it there are detailed strategies, but this is our one and only litter strategy. So if you turn to page 41, for example, it says at the top, ensure the contractors working on behalf of the council are working to improve the local environment. There's nothing for contractors to know what they're supposed to do in order to comply with that. So it seems pretty meaningless. And further down under enforcement, it talks about using all our legal powers. You know, some people who are involved in this might know what the legal powers are, but you know, if you're going to deter the public, members of the public who drop litter, it needs to say surely there what the legal powers are, that they can be fined or whatever. And again, sort of by being consistent, our approach and use all available enforcement, but it doesn't spell out to people who are reading this what those are. I was pleased to hear Mr. Warwick say that he would have regular reports to Stronger Place, but they only meet quarterly. It says in the reporting progress it'll go to the Waste Partnership Board. I don't know how often that meets, but members don't see what is said there. So I wondered if the report that goes to the Waste Partnership Board could be put in the membership bulletin so that we know more quickly what is happening. But it would also be good for it to go to Stronger Place when there's, or at least once a year. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Avey.
It is rather difficult. The Select Committee want one thing. What the first policy that was put before them, it was too long and detailed. Now, I'm told it's not detailed enough. Needless to say, I'm sticking with this version, which is a shortened version. If we make it too detailed, people won't read it. And I think it contains enough high-level information that if the public does read it, it will be informative to them. Equally, I think James's offer to report to the Select Committee on this on a regular basis would be a good way of dealing with these issues. We're always open at the Select Committee to answer any specific questions about the underlying issues, but I think I'd be happy to keep things as they are.
Thank you, Councillor Avey. I know Councillor Lyons waiting to come in, then Councillor Balcom.
Just a comment really, Chairman. To ensure drainage maintenance, one of the things that has been happening, and I've been out with Councillor Scott from Essex County Council, where drains have been blocked by building developers just pushing things down the drains. And that's caused a lot of problems. And with the heavy rains that we've had and will be experiencing ongoing issues along that line, that's something that we need to be aware of. Now, I know that Councillor Scott is looking at putting some sort of penalties on those developers to make sure that if there are blockages, they are actually cleared before they leave site. So I think that's something that is really good to be able to pick up on.
Very helpful. Thank you very much. Councillor Balcom.
Thank you, Chair. As the chairman of Place for this meeting, first of all, I would just like to say that the latest version of the report I actually like and think it's a lot better. But the 2 points that committee members have raised to me, and some of them have actually said it tonight, is it was resolved that the committee recommended that the litter strategy should come back and be reviewed and presented at the next meeting. The reasons they have not come back with any statements, as far as I understand by talking to people, is they were expecting that to happen and did not realise they had to come back. Secondly, I think there are a couple of points that we're still missing. Closer liaison with parish councils, town councils, and the adjacent authorities. If we all work together, we can actually improve this situation. It's not only Epping that's suffering, it's the local authorities around, like Brentwood, Havering, going out on the other side as well. So that is my main point, that everybody was expecting it to come back.
Councillor Avey.
Well, we are where we are. I've explained why, and it's noted. And I suggest we move on and get the litter policy issued, because it's been kicking around for some time.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Avey. And I appreciate what you're saying, Councillor Balcom, with regards to the policy not coming back initially to scrutiny. I think the important thing is James has offered to come on a regular basis to your committee and give feedback, which I think is probably more useful. Strategies are live documents and can be developed. It'd probably be that in a year's time you review the strategy and see if there's anything that you want to add into it or change from it. But we've spent more time on this strategy this evening, which has already gone through one scrutiny, than we spent on the whole budget that is about paying for the strategy. So if I could ask members, you've got the recommendations before you. I agree with what's been said, but can we move that forward? Can we agree the recommendations? Agree. Thank you. We now have on pages 51 to 62 the waste and recycling collection. Councillor Avey again.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't want to take Councillor Phillips' crowns having most of the meeting, so I'll try and make this brief. You have the paper before you, and it sets out the reasons for going to a full procurement exercise with regard to the waste and recycling contract, which is due to expire in November 2024. As members are very much aware, there has been some, shall we put it, turbulence in the contract recently with a large number of problems. This has led to quite widespread disruption in the service, which is improving, I think, at the moment. To this end, the report also recommends employing our environmental consultants to lead on the procurement process and costs. I recommend this report to you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Avey. Members of the Cabinet, Councillor Phillip.
Chairman, strange as it may seem, I actually think it makes sense spending the money on the consultants at this stage, given that refuse contract is for a significant period of time. If we don't get it right at the beginning, it's likely to end up costing us much more than the cost of the consultants up at the front. So much as I would prefer not to spend 120,000 in the coming year, I think it's the right thing to do. I also think, given the situation that we found ourselves in with our refuse collection, that not to go out to procurement would also be doing a disservice to our residents, and therefore we need to do this, and I fully support it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Phillip. I think that's very helpful. Councillor Patel.
No, I completely agree, Chairman. I think getting value for money for our residents is the most important aspect of this. I just wanted to ask if Councillor Avey could give an assurance that when we look at the recycling, we won't revert back to bins, but to keep the bags loose as they are currently.
Councillor Avey.
I think really we have a couple of things to consider here. One, costs, as always. Two, if we're looking at a procurement exercise, we need to discuss with whoever is awarded the contract, even if it is an extension with BIFA, whether those bags are the best way going forward, and also to consider that the government is issuing guidance and direction on waste and recycling, and we may find that the use of that form of recycling may not be appropriate given new guidance coming from government. So I think it's something that needs to be discussed and thought about.
Thank you. Councillor Patel.
Thank you for allowing me to come back. I think it's really important because of that this is considered, because obviously the loose bags promote for greater recycling. So any scheme that comes forward, I wouldn't want to compromise on the level of recycling that we do within the district.
I agree. You know, we need to recycle more. Equally, we have to be aware that it's not a simple solution either. Say the government tomorrow said we can't use that type of recycling, or we can't mix our green and food waste, for example, things which are possibly coming down the road. You know, it won't be an easy solution. We may find we have to have a hybrid solution of another bin and also using sacks where a bin is not possible. So I think at the moment we have the current system. We'll work towards that, but be aware that we may need to discuss changes in the future.
Thank you. Councillor Phillip.
While I understand what Councillor Patel is saying, I would point out to everybody that the recycling bags cost a lot of money on an ongoing basis every year. And as I'm sure many of us in the Chamber will have seen, residents don't exclusively use it for recycling. The number of times I've seen things like party balloons in recycling bags. Still inflated, and I think going to a party rather than being recycled, it is a significant cost. And I think Councillor Evie is quite right. We need to look at this in the whole to make sure that we're doing the right thing. Anything we can do to drive up recycling is really good. That may be keeping the bags. It may actually be providing a different way of doing it. But we need to make sure that this is something that's looked at in terms of procuring the new contracts, so we make it not just recycling good, but also financially sustainable.
Thank you. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Chairman. Probably a first. I agree with both the portfolio holders that have spoken on this. Absolutely right that we go out for a full tender exercise, because this is our most important service, and there are issues around Biffa's performance and the additional costs they're charging us and how those have been arrived at. So I think a full tendering process is absolutely right. The additional costs of consultants, I think, is right as well, because you know, our officers don't have the day-to-day expertise of letting a major contract to waste refuge contractors. Why should they? Because that's not something they have to do, you know, once every 6 years or so. So I think this is absolutely right. I think we do need to keep our options open as regards how we collect recycling. My instinct is to sympathise with the point that Councillor Vattel's making, but I just think we do need to keep our options open, and if we're going out for a tendering exercise, presumably part of that can be separate costs for different approaches to collecting recycling. I think the only other two comments I wanted to make was to further thank our officers for dealing with the current contract. And certainly in my part of Loughton, and it's got nothing to do with the quality of Councillor Brooks' councillorship or mine, but I don't actually think our ward has been too badly impacted. The only question I would ask, and I don't know whether it's an answer I can get tonight, again, anecdotally, I couldn't quite understand why some areas appear to be far more affected than others. As I say, I think in the last 6 months, my ward has probably been affected on 2 separate occasions, but you read across the district, some areas seem to have been affected, you know, week in, week out, and I couldn't quite understand that in terms of managing the existing contract, why some areas appear to have been far more badly affected than others. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Avey.
I would guess that the question raised about how some areas are affected and others are not is probably due to the fact that it's not just one team, it's multiple teams at Biffa undertaking collection. And obviously, if one team falls over in a particular area because of lack of staff or vehicle problems, that will cause a knock-on effect which may last several weeks. And in fact, one of the things that's become clear as we clear up, as it were, the problems we've been facing is people should distinguish between waste and recycling. And I think waste collection has got better across the district. It's recycling now that seems to be somewhat of a problem. Picking up the recycling bags and glass, I think has been an issue in certain areas. But as I said, I think there has been an improvement, and we'll obviously continue to work hard to make sure the service gets as good as it was during the pandemic.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, Councillor Brooks.
Councillor Whitbread, I actually had put my hand down, but I'll tell you the 2 points I'd like to make actually when I read this paper. One, to re-endorse what my colleague has already jumped in and said about how hard our officers have worked on chasing things when it hasn't worked out well, collecting recycling. They really have been very good. And also to thank the people in customer service, because I think they've had a pretty tough time, actually, having been at the end of a phone in a large organisation. And I think they've done very well. And the regular updates they tried to put on the website was very helpful. Just the second point, when I read the papers, and I'm aware I have a gap, we talked about the problem of the depot, the lack of it, on a future contract. And I wondered, because there are people in the room who do remember, we did look at a couple of options, didn't we, a few years ago? North Wales perhaps being one, if I remember rightly. And I couldn't remember why we didn't go ahead.
I'll let Councillor Ovey come in, but can I just comment on your earlier comments regards to our staff? I think the council side has really handled this situation very, very well, particularly customer services, and of course James is with us tonight. I know with Dave Marsh as well, have been absolutely first class in fronting the situation for the council. You know, we've contracted to Biffa. Biffa are responsible for the contract, but I have to say, from an Epping Forest point of view, our staff have been first class as always in handling this and dealing with the issues that are there. I'm sure that Councillor Avery will come back on the more technical part about did we look at the waste sites last time. All I would say is the world of waste is moving quickly. Councillor Avery.
Well, thank you, Chairman, and I'd echo those comments that I know how hard council staff have worked, and the key to this has been that hard work which has kept Biffa on its toes and getting the service sorted out, and also communication, and we've done a lot of work on communicating better with our residents, making sure they're aware of where there are problems and when collections can be expected, and all on. And it's been going on behind the scenes 24/7 almost. And I must say, I was getting emails on holiday about it and having to respond to residents. So we've all been doing that our part, even me as a member. On your question, yes, we don't, and this predates me. I mean, I wasn't my portfolio when this issue arose before about having our own depot, but it has now become an issue. It makes our contract more attractive if we have a depot, and so, as we put in the paper, is something we will be considering and looking at.
Good, thank you. Councillor Heap.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a few comments. Firstly, the most important thing is that collection seems to be in the problem, particularly in Buckhurst Hill. Collection of recycled rubbish has mounted outside my house for up to 3 weeks, which isn't great. And the contract with the residents is with EFDC. So whatever difficulties we're having with Biffa, you know, it needs to be sorted out in a more timely fashion. And I do thank Councillor Avey. I have emailed him on holiday, and he has done what he can to resolve the situation. But that's the biggest problem, as far as I can see. And we do need to do more recycling, and for heaven's sake, no more bins. Everybody has enough bins outside their house, particularly in highly dense residential streets. Cannot have another bin in somebody's front garden. It's hard enough to contain what's already there.
Thank you. Councillor Avey.
I can see we're going to have a robust discussion in the future about how many bins or plastic bags. Well, we're going to have that discussion, I suspect, anyway. The government will probably force us to, so I'll be looking forward to it.
Thank you very much. Okay, members, you've got the recommendations before you. Can I take those as agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. We then move on to item 12, which is the corporate plan, which obviously is my domain. And I will start by saying this has gone through scrutiny and had a good in-depth look at and has been amended accordingly. It's very much a strategic document that overarches. There is a foreword by myself, which Councillor Murray will ask what is going to be contained within it. I can say that it has now been completed but wasn't ready for this evening due to an extremely busy couple of days. But let me assure Councillor Murray that it really deals with the backdrop to how this corporate plan is set out, and is very factual and not political at all, actually, Councillor Murray, but it does set out the background of the world that we're living in today with high inflation, which we wasn't dealing with the last time we did a corporate plan, dealing with the situation with the volatile place that we now have, but our aspiration as a council to continue to deliver on those projects that matter to our residents, like the new Epping Sports Centre and that type of thing. But of course, most importantly, it's about delivering those services, as Councillor Murray himself said earlier on this evening, to maintain our services at a and still retain ourselves as a low council tax authority, which is my ambition and this administration's ambition into the future. So I can assure him that there'll be nothing untoward within the introduction, but it should be circulated very shortly. Other than that, I'm happy to take questions on the corporate plan as set out. Members, Councillor Phillip.
Not a question as such, Leader, just happy to see that the resource implications show that this is contained within existing budgets, and I fully support the idea primarily having it electronically, as this is something that doesn't need to be have lots of copies printed.
Agreed. I can remember the days when it was a big report, all printed and costing a fortune. Any other members? Councillor Murray.
Thank you. Just 2 quick points. You're absolutely right. We did have a good look at ONS, and I understand that you've got a lot of important issues and things that you're dealing with at not only district level but county level. But I think it's one thing for this to go to ONS for scrutiny without the forward, but for Cabinet to endorse it without the forward, I think is a bit. But I look forward to reading the forward with interest, and I guarantee that I'll be one of the 58 councillors that read it word for word. But more importantly, I do think we do need to have taken up Councillor Wixley's point that somewhere in the introduction we need to have established once where we use Epping Forest, we're talking about Epping Forest District, because when you just say Epping Forest, I automatically think of the forest. And for example, we've got a sentence here, Epping Forest is the place to raise your family. Well, I'm not sure I would want to raise my family actually in Epping Forest. They might do them environmentally quite good if they survive the rigours of a winter. But seriously, I think Councillor Wixley made a valid point. Right at the beginning in that introduction, we need to reference that Epping Forest is referring to Epping Forest District. And I think it was a reasonable distinction he was making. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. And I would say on the first page of the document, it says your Epping Forest, and it has a whole map of the whole of Epping Forest, showing each of the constituent parts of Epping Forest. So very clearly put. But of course, Epping Forest District is what we're referring to, but it's very, very clear in the document, and I have no issues with that. With regards to my introduction, I reiterate again, everything in that introduction is what this administration has stood for and continues to stand for and move forward on. And our aspiration remains, despite the challenges ahead, undiminished in what we want to try and achieve. So that's what my introduction says, and the corporate plan does what it says on the box. So members, with no other members wishing to speak, can I take those recommendations as agreed? Thank you very much. And then we move on to item 13, the market policy. Councillor Williamson, your first report.
Thank you, Chair. It was going to be a bit earlier, but the policy is before you. It's a policy that is missing in our raft of policies. It has been amended following discussions. The recommendation is to adopt the policy, agree the schedule. I'd like to thank the officers for all the time they put into this, and I recommend it to be approved. Thank you.
Members, this has been floating around for a time. Can we take it as being agreed, or is there any questions?
Agreed.
No? Oh, Councillor Holly Whitbread.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to thank Councillor Williamson for the work he's done on this. I know there has been a bit of back and forth around this, primarily because of a situation that arose during the pandemic with a sole trader, but I have been given the assurances that sole traders will still have the ability to set up as individuals, and this won't be affected directly by the market policy. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Members, can we finally put this to bed? Can we take the recommendations as agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. In that case, I don't believe there's any other business, and we can call it a night. Thank you all very much for your patience.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.